Okay, in this video we're going to talk about direct manipulation. So principle is good for triggered animation and direct manipulation. These are two general kind of categories for interface design, you might say. So triggered animation is simple. We do something and we get an animated response, like this. Here is an example of some continuous animation done here, or some direct manipulation, where we have continuous change that is mapped to continuous input. So here's another example. I might be able to drag this guy around here, and he's snapping to different parts of the screen, and then I also have numbers up here that are changing all at the same time. This is kind of direct manipulation. Traditionally, direct manipulation is really hard to prototype because there's all kinds of little gotchas, and we have to set up different kinds of clauses for what happens when, and yada yada yada. So typically, if you want to do direct manipulation, you have to program. Principle allows us to do a bit of it, though, fairly simply, at least more simply than we can in other places. So let's get into that. The first thing about direct manipulation in Principle is that we have to use either scrolling or dragging. We can't just tie something to cursor movement. It's just not an option. So I have a set of buttons here and a layer set, and I'm going to crop it like so. And I'm going to clip the sublayers. So now it's hidden, and then lastly I'll set the vertical to scroll, and we can scroll these buttons. So far so good. Now normally when we're doing animation in Principle we need different artboards. For direct manipulation we're just going to work in one place. We don't need the second one. But I'm going to put that back for just a second so I can show you something. Now, I want to make a little bit of parallax scrolling, so I need another image. And so I'm going to grab this image right here outside. This is where we all wish we were right now, maybe. And put it on its own artboard. That's not what I want. Let's try that again. And like so. Now here's something that's kind of interesting. The image is huge, and it's like covered up my other artboard, which is a problem, and you'll find this in other situations. But check this out. If I click the other artboard that's hidden right now, Principle will pop it out to the side and leave me some space to work. Let me give you another example of how that might happen here. So let's say I want to animate these guys from off the screen. So I might put them over here, like so. Now, it kind of looks like they're on this artboard, but notice that this one's still selected. But this seems a little hairy, but check this out. If I click this, it scoots it over, no problem. So now I can, put these guys off screen, and if I had another copy, I could put them right there, and maybe something like this. And let's make sure the names are the same. So this is just handy to know if you're going to start doing work that extends off the artboard. But let's go back to our parallax. All right, and I don't want that transition, and I don't want that artboard. Okie dokie. So I have a scrolling container, and I have a background image. And this bothers me a little bit. Let me just get this right on the edge, and we should have a nice smooth scroll. Great. All right, so I'm going to open up the drivers panel. Now, this panel is a little opaque where it's kind of hard to understand. So we'll walk it through it real slow. So first I'm going to select a layer. So right now it's a little confusing because I have it says buttons and it says buttons and scroll Y and these numbers and so on and so forth, and what do these mean? Let me notice notice when I select the layers they kind of appear down here, but this thing doesn't change. So here's what's going on. I'm going to call this area the header. What's listed in the header matches whatever is scrollable here. I'm going to make another copy of these buttons. Notice that there's two headers now. Every item on the artboard that can be dragged or scrolled will show up as a header. The headers indicate the inputs, you could say. The headers will modify the layers that are listed below, kinda. The headers will modify the layers in white that are listed below. Button 2, or buttons 2, will not modify buttons. So I got rid of the second buttons. So now I only have one header for my one scrollable item. Okay. So in this interface it says select a layer to drive. And the idea is that, again, this header, or the thing listed in this header, will drive or push or plug into whatever is down here. Now, to modify what's down here, I just select something else, like this background. So I click the background is listed down here. So this light blue header is going to modify this guy. More specifically, the scroll Y values will modify some value here. Well, what value would it modify? That's up to me. I'm going to click this blue button, and I want to modify the Y position. And so the idea is that the scroll Y will modify this. And there's another option down here, but there's nothing selected, so there's nothing there. All right, well, how do we plug these together? So next to the header, we have this range of numbers. And we can click on this and drag it. And as we do that, you'll notice that down below, the visuals change. These numbers up here are the values for scroll Y. Now normally, these would not change unless I do my two-finger scroll over it or drag it. But here I can kind of see where they're at, or how far they go, and so on and so forth. So to create a relationship between here and there, this is kind of how it works. I want to move this little slider to kind of one of the extremes, like 0. And by extreme, I mean the furthest it could go. So here's one extreme, maybe around 0 or less than 0. And then here's another extreme around 300 or 350. And by extreme, I mean that this is as far as we ever want it to scroll, or it's as far as it will actually be allowed to scroll, because we can't scroll it past that point. But I kind of want to find these extremes. Once I have the extremes, I'm going to put a keyframe here for what I want that value to be at that point in time. I know that's a mouthful, so let me just show you. When scroll Y is 0, I want this value to be, it'll be negative 988. When the scroll value is 350 or so, I want the layer to be negative 785. So here we have a range in this blue line that goes from negative 785 to negative 988. In this range, this blue line is kind of mapped to this range, which goes from 0 to 350. So when this range, when the header range changes, or when scroll Y changes, the value for Y on that other layer will change. Now let me show you this in action. So on this one artboard, as I scroll the buttons layer, the background Y value changes. Now, as you notice, this is not quite parallaxy. The problem is that the background movement is flipped. What I really want is I want them to move in the same direction but at different speeds. So I'll move my kind of playhead back to 0 on the scroll Y, and I'll put this down low. Then I'll move the playhead over here, and I'll move the image up high. That looks a little bit better. So that's the basic of drivers. There's a lot of other things that you can do with these, but it all boils down to you have a header, or you have a header with a property that gets plugged into or drives or modifies the properties of the layers below it. In order to have a header with some modifiable properties, you have to have a layer set or a layer that's either set to scroll or set to drag.